Hello and welcome. You're watching Business Plus. India has made many strides in the last decade, but nothing beats the pace at which it has adopted technology. India's internet economy is expected to grow sixfold and touch $1 trillion by 2030. The growth will mainly be driven by e-commerce verticals. This as per a joint report by Google, Temasek and Bain Company. The report suggests that India's internet economy was in the range of 155 to 175 billion in 2022, and more purchases are expected to make India a further digital economy into the future. We all say that future is digital. Well, there is now data to support that. Joining me at this point in time is Srinath Sridharan, who is a markets commentator. With me is my colleague Krishnakumar right here in the studio. Krishna, appreciate you taking time out. Let me first come to you. It appears that India's internet economy is only going to grow, and this comes on the back of more and more people consuming data, transacting online, also consuming a lot of videos for that matter, mobile games, so all of which in India leading the world, India paving the way for digital consumption. This is a story of digital India.
Yeah, and it's been driven by the fact that Indians have taken to digital transactions and digital payments unlike anybody else in the world. I mean, look at the transactions and the transaction numbers that are coming out from UPI. We're talking about, what, 14 trillion transactions already?
Right, only in the month of May.
Only in the month of May, for a month we're talking about. So, I mean, that says two things. One is the growth in penetration, and also, the Indians' ability and then the faith and the ease with which they're able to make digital payments and take back. And clearly, even in this internet economy growth, what is being clearly pointed out, Shweta, is the growth in the e-commerce market. And there's an interesting trend over here. The B2C, I think the business to consumer, the kind of e-commerce that we deal with, Amazon and any of the apps where you buy stuff from, that market is set to grow 5 to 6 times. Whereas the B2B marketplace, which is the smaller market, that is expected to grow 13 to 14 times. Now that's incredible, because let's face it, China as an economy, as an internet economy, China as a tech giant, was led by the growth of Alibaba. And what was Alibaba originally? Alibaba was a B2B marketplace, and it is still the world's greatest marketplace. Just for numbers, China's e-commerce market is valued in excess of $2 trillion. And we're talking about 60 to 65 billion dollars as far as the Indian e-commerce market is concerned. And 2030 is also not the end of the growth cycle of the Indian e-commerce market. It's going to grow even further post that. And what is going to be interesting is that how B2B players, companies are using the internet economy. Companies are making payments on the internet, taking orders on the internet, sending orders on the internet amongst themselves before they even reach the consumer. To me, that is the most fascinating aspect, Shweta.
All right. Let's also further talk about what's driving this growth. Joining us at this point is Srinath Sridharan, who's a markets commentator, but largely here to talk about how the consumer market is doing in India at this point in time. Srinath, thanks for joining us. Interesting numbers there, by the way, of how we are going to grow, not just B2C, but as Krishna pointed out, B2B, which is where, and correct me if I'm wrong, we are still a laggard. While B2C, there's been a faster adoption of tech, UPI, digital economy, and more people are out there trying to pay through their phones. B2B is where we're still lagging. Even that segment is likely to grow on an upward of 12 to 13 fold. So that is a good news.
Oh, it's absolutely good news. And I think I kind of pivoted very differently to the governance standards. You and I transacting, we don't have anything to hide. We earn in digital currency. It goes into a bank and we spend. Whereas the company traditionally have had, let's say, opaque structures, and which is what India has been cleaning up over the years. So this is not a surprise that B2B would grow multifold over the next 7, 8 years. But what is interesting, the other slice of what Krishna spoke, and I want to add on, is this. If you look at the contribution of digital economy to the GDP, it's going to double from what it is currently around 4 to 5% to 10%. $1 trillion, and we're anticipating Indian economy would be about $10 trillion by 2030 or 31. So that's 10% of GDP coming from only the internet economy. And my sense is, I think B2B adoption will be far, far faster. There are far more incentives, both from the financing structure on the demand and supply side, for the corporates to start adopting internet economy. So not a no-brainer at all. What was a very striking is the SaaS economy that the numbers have thrown out. That could be a fast mover. I mean, what a great India story, right? I mean, for the first liberalizations happened in the early 90s, and we had satellite TV. All we had was all the SaaS serials on TV, and we have moved from there to SaaS-led growth in economy. Phenomenal story there.
And SaaS is interesting, but also is online travel bookings, online media consumption, food delivery, edtech, healthcare, you name it, and India is online. In fact, report suggests, and I'm quoting here, that India is leading the world in online video streaming, digital payments, time spent on social media, while just trailing behind United States in overall time spent on the internet. So we are leading the world on, from online video streaming to being on social media.
I don't think it's from a society point of view, it's a great comparison to say that, oh, we are going to overtake US in terms of, let's say, not being productive. I mean, a lot of these activities, I wouldn't qualify it as productive spends of time. That would be a worry. But more importantly, I think what we should also, what the report has touched upon, but we must start speaking about in the mainstream conversations is consumer protection and privacy. I mean, all of this is pegged that the digital economy will grow as long as the citizens have confidence and faith in the way the data is being handled. And I think that's the conversation that will play itself out in the next years to come. The moment, let's say there's one particular, some data leakage in one of the institutions across the verticals, I think the customers just go back into a shell. And that's something that we must speak and take care of.
Okay, interesting point of view there. I mean, Srinath is saying that not all of these things are very constructive, including being on the internet and on the social media. But from what I'm reading and from what the trend is pointing to, and that is that more and more people are now aspirational in India. They want to go on the internet, they want to explore internet. And just before we started the show, Krishna, you and I were talking about the UPI story, which is, I think, a huge success stories for I'm assuming many developing countries, developing economies to emulate, a country that was once, seen to be as relatively backward, and the way in which it has adopted technology. It largely goes on to speak about the aspirations that Indians have, and more of them increasingly using UPI to not just eat food, order food, but also, move from one place to another, online shopping, online grocery, all of that pointing to a big trend.
Right. The fact that Indians are adopting technology at a much faster pace also coincides with the fact that we sort of leapfrog many technological evolutions, like big data storage infrastructure. We leapfrogged it by moving to the cloud straight away. And so Indians have been making these great leaps of technology. They've been adopting technology. The common man perhaps faster than companies, because companies, big and small, are still going through their digital transformation journeys as we speak, which was hastened with the advent of the pandemic and since the pandemic. So the fact that Indians are taking technology faster than even developed countries, Western economies and Western societies, the fact that we do more payments online than them tells a very clear trend. But what's also important to note is that Indians are learning to use technology for their everyday use and at the same time create things which can be sold in the global market, like software as a service. SaaS companies that he was talking about, apart from the fact that B2B commerce is going to grow with the growth of technology, I would say SaaS companies, you have like Freshdesk, from India doing such wonders and then getting into trouble. But then SaaS as a business, India is like, a hotspot for it, and India is doing a few billions of dollars. The global SaaS market is about $260 to $270 billion. India is doing not as much, about $20 to $30 billion is what is predicted. But that's a good where India is creating software services for the world, and that is where Indians are taking it to the next level, from taking it to their everyday lives to making things which can be used for everyday lives of people across the world.
Absolutely, going global with SaaS services. But another interesting story that is playing out there is the story of India's stack, and I want to bring Srinath into that. Srinath, India's stack has also played a very pivotal role, as some would say, in leapfrogging, as Krishna was saying, the leapfrogging that we have done in terms of technology adoption, and be it DigiLocker, be it UPI, to latest technology that is out there that is competing competing with, many would say, Swiggy and Ola and the Uber. The fact that India has made technology provisions for market to operate free of cost, very minimal costing, has also somewhat helped it in realizing that technology dream.
Absolutely, Shweta. I mean, you said it right. I mean, India is probably the only country or the second country, but first country at scale. The other one would be probably Estonia. India is the only country where government has probably innovated much faster than the private sector in a lot of space. I mean, the entire digital public infrastructure is phenomenal. I mean, you travel to Europe or US now. I mean, we struggle for payments because we realize that we have to still carry cash and credit cards and traveler's check. Whereas in India, we are so used to now just carrying a mobile phone, and you can almost live every day, and you can do all your transactions on phone. So I think that's something that we must give credit to the government. I mean, irrespective of whichever side of the leanings anybody would come in, it is the government that has actually innovated on the digital public space. And you look at the entire value chain of even the government services, whether it is their procurement or dispensation of credit, almost everything has gone digital. And I think what the private sector can build on it is, I think, left to their imagination and scale from here. And that is why, I mean, every single fund worth their name, whether it's in the early stage investments or private equity space, are already in India. This is a market which they can't miss.
Right, and I specifically want to talk about ONDC because we've been having this conversation here on News9 for a while, how ONDC is likely to challenge working models of many of these e-commerce players, including your aggregators like Paytm, and in fact, Swiggy, as I said, Zomato to Ola to Ubers, all of that will be challenged with ONDC. It is already being challenged. What we're given to understand, ONDC is very, very quickly adopting not just for the customers, but also for B2B transactions.
I was just about to get there.
About success story of ONDC there.
I was just about to get there. You know, that's where it ties up to what we've been discussing so far. Even ONDC. ONDC is the UPI moment for marketplaces, for online commerce. What UPI did to digital transactions and digital payments, ONDC is going to do to online commerce. And and when you talk about that, ONDC is being promoted and is being asked for companies to take up and get onto the platform and start using it. And that's where the key lies, Shweta. And that's where you're going to see the maximum amount of growth, simply because, as you rightly pointed out, we've been a little bit of laggards when it comes to B2B online commerce. And that's the reason why the growth rate is going to be double that of B2C online commerce. It's an incredible story. And the fact that we have that innovation called ONDC, and that's powered by the government, is another incredible thing, because all major technological innovations in the West and across the world have come from non-government backed entities, all private entities. And here in India, from UPI to ONDC, we're doing it with the backing of the government.
Right. And Srinath, I want to quickly get you in on how you're reading ONDC's fast progress and adoption. We're given to understand many businesses are now taking to ONDC. It's a great window of opportunity to connect directly with your customer without an intermediary, and you're not paying a very high fee, which is a win-win both for the customer as well as the business. How do you see that ONDC story unfolding, and do you see more businesses now taking to ONDC? Is it posing as a big challenge as we would like to think, or is reality different from what we are understanding here?
So I think I have a slightly contrarian view. I mean, why is the government trying to create a marketplace of marketplaces? I mean, it's almost like everybody now claims to wanting to build a super app. I think marketplaces by nature have to be left to the markets and the consumers. So if government's intent was to offer consumer protection, price protection, or stop any pilferage or any of the coercive actions that they thought the other platforms were taking, there are other methods to actually offer those protections to the consumers. So to me, I'm still kind of conflicted. Yes, I mean, from the structure point of view, creating a public protocol point of view, government has done that and pushed that. But almost you have invited platforms or investors of platforms to come to India and invest billions of dollars. And suddenly you pull the rug under them, saying that, you know what, now I'm creating my own platform. You better compete within that. And that's, to me, is it the right signal that we are sending to foreign investors? I'm not too sure. And that's where I'm kind of divided there.
Okay, interesting. We often say the government has no business being in business. And do you think, Krishna, that is contrary to that principle? Government, although it says, and let me clarify that, because we've had the Chief Business Officer of ONDC on the show about 2 to 3 weeks ago, and he very well clarified that all that we're doing is we're acting like a handshake. We're not an intermediary. We're not getting into the business. We are not for profit. So we are only facilitating that handshake between the customer and the retailer. Would you agree with that analogy, or do you think Srinath's concerns are valid here?
Srinath's concerns are absolutely valid, but the way I look at it is this: when the first time open source software came about, where people, users could just get in and then improve the software. I'm talking about the times of Linux, if I may. That was considered like a big disruptor, because at the end of the day, who is supposed to create an operating system? Microsoft or Apple. A company sits and the team and the coders, and they decide and whatever. What is this? You're doing it, putting it up on the internet, you're creating a code for an operating system, etc., etc. So I would see ONDC as a similar kind of an open source, except that this source has been opened by the government, if I may. That's the way I would look at it. I'm not sure if he would agree with it. You can check with him.
Okay. Srinath, do you want to come in at this point?
The answer is very clear. No, I don't agree with that point. As I said, typically governments and regulators are far better, and enough regulations and law that they can make to protect consumers and marketplaces in terms of fair practices. But to say that, I'm not happy with the way something is happening and I'm going to create my own parallel market or a different market, it doesn't really cut the ice theoretically. And to me, as let's say, the industry observer, the moment I see this kind of PR blitzkrieg that ONDC has had in the last 1.5 months, Shweta, I think you yourself have hosted 2 people about ONDC in the last 1 month, and you look at every channel. That's a typical private sector behavior of pushing the PR content. And why? And as I said, this is a little academic exercise in itself, and let the market will decide. Over a point, again, this is again a market decision which will happen. Whether they embrace ONDC, we can only push it or take it to the market, but the market will decide.
Srinath, if I may ask one question, we don't have an Alibaba in this country, and we've been waiting for an Alibaba for a very long time. Isn't that the truth?
Yes and no. If you compare an Alibaba or anybody else, China, the way the governments operate, you look at every single large Chinese corporate, there's actually government pushing it and government backing. By that logic, I think the biggest bank in India is SBI. So there is an analogy there. But the government need not be in every single sector. And that's the point I'm trying to say. They can create an ecosystem and allow, and especially in the innovation space, they've created protocols, and I think that's a fair bit of it. It's almost like building a stadium and drawing the athletic track and saying, well, I can do 100 meters, 200 meters, hurdle race, everything. But it doesn't mean every single government officer is going to start running those races, right? That's a point, and that's the analogy.
Fair enough.
Okay. I also want to quickly touch upon another aspect that the report points to, and that is the buy now, pay later expansion. The report essentially says there's going to be a 45% year-on-year growth in the number of total loans that will be disbursed. I'm not sure how to read this, Krishna.
Well, it's the same discussion we had about scam loan apps coming out of the scanner in India, and 275 scam loan apps. Let's begin over there. Clearly, there's a demand for buy now, pay later, take loans. Make staggered payments. So many people turn their credit card bills into EMI payments, which
Absolutely.
they make. So it's very normal. It's become a common thing. In India, specifically speaking, a country that doesn't like credit, where culturally we're told, credit is
Not
bad.
to take loan,
Don't
not to
take
take
loan,
credit.
don't take credit. So, but things are changing. Things are changing with technology. Things are changing with faster adoption of technology by the common people of India. So, if you're telling me that in the next few years you're going to see a multiple,
45%.
a near 50% increase, I hate to say this, but I'm not surprised.
Okay. Srinath, what are you making of this figure? Essentially, I think Krishna is right. In a traditionally conservative capital market or a household where people are largely not encouraged to take credit or loan, we are looking at more and more people, opting for these buy now and pay later scheme. And this could be in retail space. This could be, you buying electronic items, gadgets, etc. Essentially, there is a growth story here. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get more and more people to start buying, to start purchasing, even when it's beyond their capacity to pay upfront. good news for digital India, but I think not so good news when it comes to the capacity of an average person to pay back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's consumption financing, right? I mean, are we doing consumption financing for lifestyle or livelihood? I mean, I think that's the concern that if I were the person asking this question, I would want to ask RBI this question of what is their mindset on the growth of BNPL, looking at what they've been in terms of bringing regulations around it over the last couple of months. I think they're not going to let India go the US way of unmanageable debt, not just at the national level, but even at the society level. That poses the larger question: are regulators moral science teachers? In a sense, they are. They have to manage this. And we're also seeing a generational change, right? We have seen the baby boomers were very, very credit averse. Credit was a very, very bad word. It was almost like pop. People took loans only to buy the house, and typically the father-in-law or the father gave the money for buying the house. Then came the next generation, where they started taking credit specifically for growth capital or any quick needs, which was long-term education loan, house loan. And now we have a generation, millennials and Generation Z, where you find a fancy TV, you want to finance your vacation to just go abroad now on the spur of a moment, and you can pay it over 12 months. I think that's the moment that we are in. Is it tenable and sustainable? I think that is what RBI would look at, and that is what I think all of us have to look at it as society, saying how far is it sustainable? And there's no moral right or wrong here. That's the way I think generations' mindset is.
Absolutely. No specific right and wrong here, but then the report, and I'm going to conclude with that, the report is also pointing towards various omens and various challenges that we have to be very careful about. And one of them being, trying an ability to distinguish between personalization and data privacy. I think it all boils down to, as more and more people go online, and more retailers to more and more service providers are trying to personalize that service, that product for you, the need for data privacy, the need for an individual to feel safe on the internet is still very paramount, and I think something that we haven't done really well at, Srinath.
Yeah, I mean, I think long way to go, right? I mean, data privacy, most of us don't know what data privacy means to us. I mean, a lot of us, I think, are armchair social media activists, right? I mean, we would talk about how we need data privacy, how the government needs to pitch in, but we don't realize the amount of data that we're letting go in the name of downloading various apps, access to various internet sites, or the very fact that we keep posting our own social media messages. I think the responsibility of data privacy and protection has to start even from the individuals. It cannot be left alone for the institutions like the governments. The governments will do what is good for the aggregate of the society, but when it comes to individuals, I think we'll have to start owning up responsibility. Sadly, that's why I said we're all armchair activists. We do it. We keep assuming that somebody will fix the problem, not us, and we'll have to start from there.
Okay. Interesting there, Krishna, because, Srinath gave a very interesting analogy. We're all armchair activists in a way that we know that there needs to be...
There is no arm.
There's no arm in your
arms
chair.
In my chair. I have an armless chair. You have one.
I have arms in my chair, but essentially the proverb referring to how each of us would like to speak about how it's a problem, but not do much. Yeah. And I think government, I mean, I don't know if I got Srinath correctly, but government is also equally responsible for making sure that all these companies who have access to our data is able or is protecting us from frauds, is protecting our data from being abused, being misused. But all of that, it goes for a toss when each day, every day, a person is literally snatched away with their, from their earnings, or their earnings are taken away by the mean of a fraudulent messages or a fraudulent link that you get and you end up clicking on it. So while more and more people are getting on internet, there is an absence of understanding of safe practices on how to use the internet. That is problem number one. Problem number two, there is no safety or security, or hardly any safety or security. We are, and while government tries to tell you to contact the authorities, to try and register a complaint, but all of that is done in the after effect. The idea is to protect consumers before they enter into this conundrum of what to do, how to protect themselves.
Right, of course, and that means that it has to begin with a lot of education. And we would say that to avoid more and more armchair social media activists, there needs to be more and more education about how the internet works, and more material out there for people who are first-time adopters of internet transactions are able to go through, because as you're rightly pointing out, it's always a reaction once a scam happens. Once there's a widespread scam, they're like, oh my God, people do not know. And you're not just talking about first-time internet adopters from the rural market. We're talking about people in big cities.
Absolutely.
Educated people in big cities who are first-time adopters into internet transactions, digital transactions. People from from our parents' generation who are the first time making transactions online, who need a lot of hand-holding when it comes to making sure that they make safe, secure transactions and make sure they don't give their OTP, password, account number, etc., away. Even now, even today in 2023, our generation probably we were learning it about 5 years ago, but then 5 years down the line, we're all pros at it. We also know where the scams can happen, and we are not the ones who are touching on this.
I fell for the scam, Krishna, so I'm worried.
I was just about to say we are not falling, but hey,
no,
maybe I'm a little fast over here. We are still struggling to make sure that we're not getting into a scam.
Absolutely.
So there's a need for.
Let me say this, since I mentioned this. I got a call from somebody who said they have a parcel that belongs to me. I don't know, maybe I ordered or did not order, and I did not have the time to check whether I ordered or did not order. They said, can you pass me the OTP that you've received? And I gave the OTP thinking that I did in fact order something that I don't remember at the top of my mind, and it so appeared that they got access to my account, that particular e-commerce account. There was money in the wallet. They took the money out, they changed the password, and I could never recover the account or the money that was lost. So, it's easy to say that these are the first-time internet users that do not know the do's and don'ts. But even very educated and people who are aware and people who talk about this, read about this, are also falling prey.
Yeah, and think about it. Once upon a time in these deliveries, we thought it was safer if the delivery guy checked an OTP with our phones and made sure they gave the delivery only to the right person, because we are the only person for which the product is supposed to be delivered to. So the OTP was supposed to be a protective measure. Here you have the same protective measure being used for a scam. So, the problem, I'd say, is that technology is evolving at such a fast pace. It's very difficult for governments to keep up with it. What would be good from the government's end is greater education and greater awareness creation, like what they're doing with those Reserve Bank of India ads. How you should not fall for banking scams. Similarly, there needs to be widespread education on how people should not fall for online scams and digital scams, and that's the need of the hour to start with you. It's a fair point that you're making. But what I would also say is that going forward,
please don't tell me not to share OTPs. I know that already.
I'd say that, to start with, never. If there's something called as an OTP, it's meant for you to be typed into another place in your phone, another website on your phone. It's not meant to be spoken out loud to anybody.
No, but it's supposed to be given. That's my problem. And let me also bring Srinath before I let him go. Srinath, essentially, if you get a delivery today and you're asked for an OTP by the person who's standing with your parcel out there outside of your doors, what are you going to do? Are you going to give them the OTP or not? Because we don't know who to trust anymore.
So, this is again personal experience. I generally ask them for the device that they hold in their hand. It's just call it the sense of distress of saying that I want to see the screen myself.
Okay.
I don't know him, because how would you do it? So I think more importantly, I think you touched a very raw nerve when you spoke about the human emotions, right? Typically, most of these fake apps, fake calls, all that try to create a pressure situation so that within that 10 seconds, you are forced to react. I think somewhere we'll have to get some psychiatrists or psychologists to kind of demystify what happens in those 10 seconds and what is it that you can do to take precautions on. Almost every single scam that happens is within those 10 seconds of pressure test.
Okay. No, but apart from that, what should the retailers do to ensure that customers like me do not fall for the scam? And if I can, I'm sure a lot of others can as well. So what should there's too much onus and responsibility. That my problem is the onus and responsibility is not just on the customer. There is some onus also on the service provider, in this case the e-commerce platform, and also on the government. So this has to be like a three-pronged effort, as opposed to the entire responsibility resting with the recipient of a product or a service, which is an average human.
See, but that's again why responsible platforms anyway give you two-way authentication. They send a message to your phone, they send a message to your registered email ID. But it just that let's look at it. We all are in a rush situation almost all the time. So the moment somebody calls, we tell them, why didn't you check my computer screen? Why didn't you check my phone and give the OTP? I think we have to be far more governed there. I would
Okay.
take this argument if we think some of the brands don't do these 1 or 2 step authentication. I mean, they have to be held up. Otherwise, most of the responsible ones actually already follow it. But there will be these kind of scamsters which will come up almost on every single aspect. I mean, as Krishna said, I mean, the technologies are just emerging, and we are going back to the basic human values of greed and FOMO, right? I mean, FOMO. I mean, why is everything happening because of FOMO? I mean, Krishna got it, I didn't get it. Why should I not get it? I mean, there's a conversation for another day. We had almost like a Twitter Spaces competitor, right? Completely vanished. I mean, everybody's question last year was, did you get invitation to join that app, download that app? Completely
Right.
vanished, right? So a lot of these will happen, whether it's in finance or e-commerce. So the model of the story, I think, shop lesser, or at least remember what you shop.
Right,
Okay.
Srinath, just before the thing is that you're talking about FOMO, the moral of the lesson, the latest, apart from FOMO, the latest is called JOMO, or joy of missing out. I think more and more people should really get into JOMO mode and, enjoy the joy of missing out.
Please miss out. Not everything new is to be experienced. That's an interesting conversation, gentlemen. Unfortunately, I'll have to leave it at that. Thanks very much for joining with your inputs on that
Thank you.
very, very important story, Srinath. Of course, be very, very careful of what you're transacting, when you're transacting. But good news there as far as an overall picture of how Indian digital economy is going to grow at about and more than upward of 6 times, six-fold increase in the internet economy that is expected according to a latest report that was released today. But we're going to shift focus for now. Oppo, OnePlus, Realme are all set to separate. BBK Electronics Corporation, the parent company of Oppo, OnePlus and Realme, has separated the three brands with sales accounted for in their own books. Now, China's largest smartphone maker is seen to be taking steps to de-risk its business from future government actions against Chinese companies. It is being reported that BBK has transferred sales and distribution of OnePlus and Realme into their legal entities. Oppo Mobile India will continue sales of its namesake brand. Remember, Oppo is under India government's lens already for alleged customs duty evasion, and the firm's auditors have warned, and I quote, of significant doubt on the company's ability to continue as a going concern. Joining us at this point in time is Tarun Pathak, who's the Director of Counter Research. Also, Krishnakumar continues to be with me here in the studio. Tarun, coming to you first, how are we to read these developments and what sort of impact will it have on the brand overall?
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. I think it's an interesting development. If you look at the past couple of years, there's a lot that has happened with respect to the overall smartphone landscape in India, with respect to the different OEMs. And these three different OEMs we are talking, they are capturing almost like 30% of the market. So obviously we have seen different, like these brands continues to grow. By the way, OnePlus just had their record month in India in the month of April. For the first time, they entered among the top five. So all these brands, they have this, they see India as a long-term opportunity. So I think they will do everything what they can to de-risk, looking at some of the futuristic opportunities, be it from the distribution side, the product side, or even from their operations with respect to manufacturing in India. So I think this is a step to uh, like make sure all these three brands remain independent, but at the same time have very different strategies when it comes to go-to-market actions for this brand.
Okay. Tarun, from what we're given to understand, so far there has been, some sort of help that these brands would receive on the back end as far as their marketing and advertisement is concerned. With all three brands now working as separate entities, will there be more competition? Will there be no help that they receive? And since they were already competing, is the competition now going to get more and more furious because they're only competing for that set segment?
Correct. So I think the change is happening on the India as a region side, but if you look at from the China side, uh, all these three entities might be receiving a lot of like or sharing resources, be it in terms of R&D. So if you look at just from the Oppo's perspective, they spend billions of dollars on the R&D side of things, and obviously it doesn't make sense for the Realme to basically spend on at a similar scale or OnePlus for that matter. So there will be shared resources maybe from the HQ side But India, I think they want to like make sure their operations remain very different. But at the same time, we'll say that competition is definitely among the top five. But also there we have seen a sense of cannibalization happening within some of these brands in India. Like for example, the OnePlus growth is coming at the expense of some of the brands like Vivo or Oppo or even Realme for that matter in that segment. So I think it's not you can say that very direct competition of these brands, but at the same time in the background one can expect a shared resources happening at maybe at the global scale or the global level.
Right. If I were to ask you from a pure consumer perspective, people looking to buy Oppo or Realme or OnePlus, what should they look forward to or not look forward to? How should they be around when it comes to making that purchasing decision?
That's an interesting angle. So if you look at and it's an interesting thing. Many of the consumers, when we asked them in our consumer survey done a couple of years back, they didn't see OnePlus as a Chinese brand. So that was an interesting because many people thought that it's an European brand or so. But I think from the consumer angle, and by the way, all of these brands are being assembled in the Oppo factory, right? Most of them, uh, be it Realme or let's say OnePlus for that matter. For consumer, I think what they're looking at is some sort of differentiation within products. So, for example, these brands need to be very careful when it comes to their product strategy. So, for example, uh, now the hardware ceases to be a differentiating factor for a lot of these OEMs, right? So there's a lot of competition on that. You can't do much on the hardware side. It's just the ID differentiation or maybe a couple of features you are doing, but they need to be like for example on the UI side of things. So for example, the color OS in Oppo or the Oxygen OS or the Realme UI, that is where one of the differentiator will lie. So I think consumers are very smart now. They already know what they are going to buy, and these brands need to make sure like they have this differentiated portfolio, not overlapping on at any level, be it any different price tiers.
Okay, interesting. So essentially, it's the UI that is going to be the differentiator. All three, of course, continue to remain, sister companies, even if, and the businesses will be separated. However, I want to understand what will it mean for their targets and revenues? Will that change as well for the Indian market, or will that remain constant and same as it was before the three entities separate?
Difficult to comment. Again, these strategies are very different from the like regional level. But I believe from just the observation point of view, I think it should be different. So, for example, each of these brands, when we look at, they're at a very different trajectory in terms of the maturity of the market. So, we talk about OnePlus. They has smartly transitioned from just a premium brand to now the mass market Nord series. If you look at Realme, they have been again scaling up the price tier, launching multiple models in the mid to high tier. And you have Oppo, with they have their ambitions in the premium space with the kind of the fold what they have done. So each of these brands have a very different journey in India. So I think obviously the target will be different, because if you look at the premium space, that is growing much faster than the overall smartphone market in India. So if a brand that is operating in the, let's say, premium smartphone we define as 30,000 and above, it will be a very different market scenario for them, and maybe they have their own ambitions gaining share in that segment.
Right, at this stage, the only thing I want to ask you is that does this entire move to create these three separate entities, officially make these companies and these brands safe from future prosecution? Because as we're talking about, Oppo still has proceedings against it from the Indian authorities as we speak.
Yeah, it will be again difficult to comment on the future, but if you look at that will also see what is the offline or the channel structure of what these brands take. So, for example, OnePlus used to be very online heavy brand until now, but in the recent months they have pivoted very fast in the offline channel. They have scaled, they have the tie-ups with the large format retails and doing really well on that. Realme also has their ambitions on the like expanding their reach in India. So I think again from the Oppo's perspective, they have a solid distribution structure in India. They have changed a bit post that news, and I think they are going to have something which will be very different or very different from how they do business in other countries. So I think the nature of business might change, but the long term vision will be obviously to look at the India opportunity that is there in the rural India, because we still have 50%, 52% smartphone penetration in terms of population, and there is a room for all the players to grow and coexist at the same time. So I think it might be the way to de-risk their businesses a bit and see how each of these brands go on a different trajectory when it comes to the Indian opportunity.
You know, the sense that India is going after Chinese brands and Chinese smartphone makers, you know, is essentially, I wouldn't say there is a lot of merit to that, because what government has accused Oppo of is that it avoided custom duty, and that too to the point of 4,300 crore and upward. So the idea that there is a policy in place, there's a need to pay customs duty, and Oppo did not do that, and hence why government's lens, in fact IT department's lens, is on Oppo as opposed to government cracking down unilaterally on the Chinese smartphone makers.
Right, and again, very difficult to further deep dive on this issue, because it could be because of the definition issue as well. It could be because of the different legalities that are involved in each of these, be it from Vivo's angle or be it from Oppo for that matter, or even from the Xiaomi that matter, because all of this nature and from the looks of it, we think it's not just targeted at Chinese. It just appeared to be the Chinese brands, because these are the brands that are capturing almost like 70-75% of the smartphone market. So naturally, it seems very obvious, because Chinese brands have a lion's share of the Indian smartphone market. But going forward, I think there will be some kind of structure that these companies will take place. There will be they have huge operations in India. India continues to be the number one strategic market outside China. In terms of user base, again, a very solid connect with the end users. So I think these companies are here to stay. All what we have seen in the past couple of quarters is just realigning their business and see how it takes them forward for the next 5 years or 10 years down the line.
Okay. What's the way ahead for Oppo here? It has been accused there is going to be, of course, a legal battle that will ensue. And if Oppo is asked to pay up, if it refuses to pay up, or if it pays up, we don't know which way it will go. However, what's the way forward for Oppo looking like in India?
I think overall his brand is still positive, right? So if you look at from their manufacturing ambitions, they still employ large workforce. They invest a lot on the R&D. If you look at some of their products are really good. So I think, and not just the smartphones, all these companies, smartphone companies are looking at the ecosystem approach as well. So they'll not just have these devices only for that matter. Going forward, we might see something like TWS or the wearables or the hearable category, or even the TVs, right? So these companies will continue to expand their reach. In India, is now the second largest smartphone market in the world, and obviously presents a great opportunity for this company. So all they need to do, and for all the companies, they need to abide by the rules of the land. I think that is the intent. But looking at the India opportunity, I think they'll continue to go very aggressive in
Okay.
this space.
Okay. You know, Tarun, you said BBK has approximately 40% of the Indian mobile market, if I'm getting that figure right.
Yeah. Yeah.
35% of the Indian mobile market. Who are the other big players? And if, let's say, Oppo, even though it's very you know, gung-ho on India and India as a market, however, there is a serious charge here of evasion of customs duty. If that charge is proved and it's made to pay, and that hurts its plans to continue in India, who are the other competitors we're looking at?
I think we have like Apple that is doing really well in India. Samsung is doing great. We have Motorola that is doing well, and then you have the couple of upstarts, not just the upstart, but in this space. Like for example, Google is doing well with their Pixel series. We have seen nothing doing well with their first launch, and they have another new launch coming around the corner. So there are some players as well. Then you have the players like Transient, the Techno, Infinix, ITEL. So we have multiple brands that are there, but again, top five brands capture 90% of the market, and we do not see that trend changing in a big way. You might see in and out of some of the players, but largely it's likely to stay the same.
Okay. Interesting. Apple is going big. on India, Krishna, and we keep talking about Apple's aspirations. We recently talked about how Apple's new Make in India big to have a plant right here in India, which is expected to, start operating or send out its consignment by April of 2024. So that's just about a year from now, and Apple is being given the right sort of support and momentum, not just by the central government, but also by the state government, and posing to be a competitor, if not in volume, at least in not in the sales figure, in the number, at least in the money and the amount of market share it has by terms of price, because obviously Apple products are high end and more expensive.
Wait, the fact of the matter is that Apple is still the largest in the country in terms of value. It might have sold lesser number of phones. It's going to take Oppo to sell 10 phones to match one Apple iPhone. So that's the kind of difference we're talking about over here. So the Apple story, to me, the debate around it, to me, it's a little done with, because all these memeing it about it being expensive, what does it do differently, why is one iPhone the same as the other iPhone? All of that have been put to rest. Look what they did with the Vision Pro. I mean, you're talking about an AR, VR headset that's there in the market. So many companies have already, introduced AR, VR headset. But when Apple introduces an AR, VR headset, you see the kind of reactions it gets. It does something different. It does something consumer friendly. It is, of course, priced at 3,500, 3 lakh rupees plus, and it will come to India only in 2024, second quarter of 2024. You're talking about first quarter of 2024 launch in the US, and then to other markets. I'm guessing India is going to be faster now than ever before, now that we have 2 stores and the 3rd store in India being open. Apple is doing a full 360 in India. In terms of sales, in terms of capturing popular imagination, in terms of manufacturing here from India, because it's making sense in every single way. Not just is India a market that Apple has to explore, and is a hugely untapped market still for Apple, but India is also a great untapped manufacturing hub, which it's waking up to, which India is becoming a wants to become a manufacturing hub for everything from semiconductors to mobile phones. And so in that sense, it fits in perfectly. And seeing what's happening in China, we were just discussing what's happening to Chinese brands in India. Apple has nowhere else to go at this stage than India. So and the moves have been very strategic.
Let's not forget that Elon Musk was in Beijing just about a week ago. His private plane took off. He's had conversations with the top management and with the top sort of people, administration, politicians in China. So he is outreaching.
It wasn't Tim Cook.
It wasn't Tim Cook.
It wasn't Tim Cook. That's all I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
People are taking their punts, and Elon Musk is somebody who's known to take contra punts, if I may. So if he wants to do that, he's free to do that. And I would say, I'm nobody to criticize Elon Musk, because most people who criticized Elon Musk fell flat on their face. So I'd say that let him go do his thing. Let Elon Musk go to China, do his thing. But even, for example, I'd give another example. Italy was one of those rare European powers which signed a deal with China. Now they're out of that deal because that deal, they realize, doesn't serve their interests well enough. So, things are going to go back and forth with China. Right. But the fact of the matter is the environment is very difficult for China, be it in terms of operating factories, keeping in mind all human rights and regulations, and et cetera, et cetera. And of course, as a profitable place, so many issues it's been dealing with, and hence, Apple has been making a measured move into India. Let's face it, by the time they launched their first store, enough and more noise has been made about how many phones they're already sending it out of their plants, assembling plants here in India. What I'm looking forward to is Apple making every single thing of an iPhone right here in India, assembling it in India and setting it out, and that
Final
being
piece.
a majority of its production and exports.
All right, so obviously a robust sales is what Krishna is looking at, making not just assembling here, but making everything here in India. Where are you placed, Tarun, in this debate, about making India, not making in India, and of course the larger question on phones that are more expensive or the Chinese phones that are relatively cheaper? Who's better? Who's not better? Where are you placed in this conversation?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. But if you look at of all the bigger players, like they have 300 plus suppliers, component suppliers that are all over the world. Obviously, most of them used to be in China. So I think right now what we are looking at is the phase 1 of India, Make in India success story, which is more or less assembling. Now the second phase will be sourcing it locally. As of now, you can source chargers, cables, maybe some part of housing, and other battery from India. But if you look at the display, SoC, the chipset we say, or even the memory, these three contributes to almost 60% of the cost of your phone. And none of this we have in India. And these products can only happen if you have semiconductor fab in India, and that is where I think the government push is there for with this the new semiconductor scheme, $10 billion incentives, looking at
Okay.
the display fab, OSAT assembly. So I think these will be the steps. It will not happen overnight. I think 10, 15 years is what we need to look at. But as of now, standing today, we source only 15% of what can be made out of the phone from India. Rest 85% we import it, and most of it
Right.
coming from India, Taiwan, Japan, and other countries.
Okay, and in India going big there and trying to manufacture within the country, and sooner the better. Tarun, appreciate you taking time out and joining us on this broadcast. Krishnakumar, thanks very much for joining us with your inputs. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business Plus. Keep watching News9.